Hi, this is Maggie from Design Code Debug Repeat. Welcome to the channel. You've written a Java program that reads input with the scanner, and when you run it, you get an input mismatch exception, or the scanner just ignores one of your inputs. But you know you're reading the correct types of data with the correct methods in the correct order. What's going on? The source of these errors is the two different ways scanner methods read input. I have here a small example written to read from the console called stats sheet error, and the same example, but reading from a file called stats sheet file error. Let's look at the console reading program first. The program creates a scanner object called standardIn, and it then prompts the user for some inputs, which are stats for a role-playing character, and reads them one at a time: strength, name, and wisdom. When I run it, it prompts for strength. I type 18 and press enter, and notice it prompts for the name, but skips right past obtaining input, or appears to. And it prompts for wisdom. Now, if I notice the skip and type an integer, I type 16 and press enter, the program doesn't crash. It then prints the stats: strength 18, wisdom 16, name blank. If I didn't notice that it had skipped over the name prompt and I attempted to type the name, I'll run it again and then type 18 and then R2 the Barbarian, my character's name, and enter. I get an input mismatch exception on line 22. Line 22 is wisdom equals standardin.nextInt. The exception happens because the scanner is trying to convert the word R2 into an integer, and it can't. The file version opens a file called traits.txt and creates a scanner to read from it called fileIn. Here's traits.txt, 18 on the first line, R2 the Barbarian on the second line, and 16 on the third line. That's strength, name, wisdom. In the program, I'm using the scanner to read the strength, then the name, and then wisdom from the file. But when I run the program, I get an input mismatch exception on line 23. Line 23 is wisdom equals filein.nextInt. The same as in the console program. The program is throwing an exception because it's trying to convert the word R2 into an integer. But why is it doing that? To read the strength and wisdom in both programs, I'm using nextInt. This is one of the scanner's methods that reads the next token from the input stream. Most of the scanner's next methods work this way: nextInt, nextDouble, nextLong, nextShort, next, etc. To understand what it means to read a token, let's define three terms. First, whitespace. Whitespace refers to characters that don't display any sort of glyph, but create space between other characters. Whitespace characters include space, tab, and newline. Second, a token. A token is text that is between whitespace characters. Finally, input stream. The input stream is a buffer that's holding characters. In the console example, I created the scanner to use system.in as the input stream. System.in is where the keyboard input is stored. In the file example, I created the scanner to use the file object referencing traits.txt as the input stream. When I ran the console program and typed 18 on my keyboard, I typed the characters 1, 8, and then I pressed enter. These three characters are then stored in the input stream. The scanner's token methods ignore leading whitespace, if there is any, and then pull characters out of the input stream until they reach the next whitespace character. Remember, a token is the text between whitespace characters. So nextInt will read the 1 and the 8, successfully convert that to the integer 18, and leave the new line in the buffer. It is the same for the file reading version. The first line of the file contains the characters 1, 8, and then a new line. So nextInt will read the 1 and the 8 and successfully convert that to an integer, but it will leave the new line in the input stream because it only reads tokens, the text between whitespace characters. The error occurs in both programs when we try to read the name using the scanner's nextLine method. NextLine is a scanner method that works differently from the token reading methods. It does not read the next token from the input stream. It reads everything in the input stream until it reaches a new line. It takes the new line from the input stream, but it doesn't include it as part of the value it returns. Unfortunately, There's a new line left in the input stream from the next int call in which we read the strength value. So next line reads the new line, sees it as the end of the input, and stores everything up to the new line, which is nothing, in the name variable. That's why in the console program, it didn't give us a chance to type anything at the name prompt. There was already a new line in the input stream, it read it, and the next line method was done. In the file reading program, next line read the new line after the numbers 1, 8, and was done. The next int statement then executed and attempted to convert R2, the next token in the input stream, to an integer, and we got the input mismatch exception. Now, there are two very easy solutions to this problem, and I'll show you both. There's also a not great solution, and I'll also show you that and explain why it's not always going to work. The first solution is to put a next line statement after a token reading statement to eat up or consume that leftover new line that's in the input stream. You don't need to store it in a variable because it's not data. It's just the leftover white space that was after the token. I've got two versions of the program here with this solution. The first is the console solution called statsheetsfix1.java. Notice that after I read the strength, I have the line standardin.nextLine. That's it. It consumes the new line that's left in the input stream after reading an integer before we try to read from the input stream with nextLine. That's the only place I need to put it, after using a token reading method before using nextLine. When I run that, the program doesn't skip past reading the character's name because there's nothing in the input stream yet. Now, here's statsheetsfilefix1.java. For this fix, I'm checking if there's anything in the file before consuming the new line. I've written if filein.hasNext, filein.nextLine. Technically, I should probably check if there's something in the file before each read in case the file isn't complete. But I've put it here just to remind you that the last value in a file might not have a new line after it. So it's safest to check if there's another character in the file before consuming the new line. When I run that, I get no input mismatch exception. Now let's look at the second fix. The second fix is to use nextLine to read everything and convert values to other types as needed. So in this fix, we won't be switching between token reading and line reading methods. This is statsheetsfix2.java. I have a new variable called line, a string, and instead of reading the strength and wisdom with strength equals standardin.nextInt and wisdom equals standardin.nextInt, I'm writing line equals standardin.nextLine, and then strength equals integer.parseInt line, and then the same for wisdom, line equals standardin.nextLine, wisdom equals integer.parseInt line. So again, we're never reading a token from the input stream. We're reading entire lines. I'm then using the method integer.parseInt to convert that text into an integer. You can use double.parseDouble to parse a string to a double data type if you want to use this technique to read a double value with the scanner. I've got essentially the same code in statsheetfilefix2.java. I'm reading all strings with nextLine from the file and converting the strength and wisdom to integers with integer.parseInt. Now, we've solved this problem with a mix of token and line reading methods, and we've solved it with all line reading methods. Can we solve it with all token reading methods? Not really. I've written the console reading version with all token reading methods here. This is called statsheetbadfix.java. Here I'm reading the strength and wisdom with nextInt as before, but instead of reading the name with nextLine, I'm reading it with next. First, I'll run the program, and instead of naming my character R2 the Barbarian, I'm going to name it simply R2. So I enter 18 R2 16, and the program works. It seems like a reasonable solution, but let me go back to my character's original name. I'll run it again and enter 18 R2 the Barbarian, and oh, input mismatch exception. The same thing is happening again, basically. The program is trying to convert text to an integer. This time it let me type a name because I'm using next to read the name, a token reading method. But remember, a token is the text between whitespace characters, and there are spaces in R2 the Barbarian. So it read the first token, R2, and stored that in name. And then when we got to the nextInt method on line 22, it found the next token in the input stream, v, and tried to convert that to an integer. Each call to next consumes only one token, even if the user typed a complete sentence. The next method will read the next token in the input stream, which could work for reading text if you know there will be no white space in your text. But if there's a chance there will be white space in the text, this solution will not work. You should use one of the two solutions I showed you here, either mixing token reading and line reading by consuming a new line after reading a token before reading a line, or reading lines and converting them to numeric types as needed. For completeness, you should know that it's possible to change the delimiter that the scanner uses to separate tokens, but that's a more advanced topic. I hope this helped you solve your input mismatch exception. I do have a complete video on the scanner with visualizations if you want more detail. I'll link it here and in the description. If you're still stuck, drop a comment below and I'll help you debug. As always, have fun and keep coding.